We are at the IMF. Presently, we are, is it in New York? And we are, is it Washington? And we are talking to the IMF to seek to get a bailout. Now we know that we are going for a full-blown out subscription. And the IMF is discovering some things. Very worrying, but what do they mean? That the debt to GDP ratio that we have heard about as hovering around 55% is not true. And that the Bank of Ghana has been cooking up that figure. The figure is 70%. And also that by 2015, or is it 2016 rather, that's the fund says that by 2015, our debt situation could reach beyond 70% of our country's total economic outputs. What does that mean? And also, you know that the NIA, that is the National Identification Authority, some say so far they have spent 20 million Ghana cedis. Imani is putting out some figures, say that they believe that they have spent close to 60 million Ghana cedis, and yet the Ghana card, some people don't have it. People in the north, 3 northern regions, still haven't had the process properly done. Those who did it, cards have not been issued, and yet we are being told that it is seeking a loan of $115 million to scrap the first one and do a fresh one. Some say, what a waste. Kweku?
Well, you know, the IMF thing is disturbing because it's making me recollect somewhere early 2001. We were made to pay some $30-something million for misreporting. The misreporting had occurred between 1999-2000 and was in violation. We provided wrong figures. If you check the Hansard, I brought a copy here. In November 2001, Parliament discussed it, and we ended up paying. Now, it's raised issues, further issues in this country in recent times. We've been debating whether figures and statistics given to us by some of our institutions of states are reliable or credible. I've always preferred to be naive in this case by suggesting that I go with what comes from official sources until something contrary is put out there. I'm beginning to have a review of my view on that stance, because this is a very serious matter. If indeed it turns out, and we are collaborating with the IMF, we go through the figures at the same time with them. So if it turns out to be true, you see the dent on our national image and credibility will be huge. I'm not going to be totally judgmental now, but I'm very, very worried. I'm very disturbed. So I think we need more information and answers from officialdom. They should, as early as possible, give us information that could clarify things. If what the IMF is saying is true or not, we need to know. But we've had a history of having misreported before, and so it makes me a bit worried.
Okay.
Now, with regards to the other one,
National Identification Authority.
yes, you see, my initial stance was that hold on to the new project. Let's look back at the old one. Let's investigate what has happened to it, because really too much money has gone down the drain.
Right.
I still hold just a small paper indicating that I was
waiting for your card.
Yes, I'm
and
waiting.
They have been complaining all along that
Yes.
they're looking for money to be able to churn out the card.
Yes, so there's a problem there, and that is why I think many Ghanaians are worried.
Right.
No, but it doesn't. I'm not for a moment suggesting that the PPP is fraud.
Okay.
I have no such evidence.
Thank you. Abraham, what do you say?
On the IMF issue, I don't think it is the IMF word that government or the Bank of Ghana cooked the figures. I'm sure they are disagreeing with the calculations or the figures. And I think that this is a matter that can be reconciled. I don't know the cutoff point where this calculation stopped. Because I know as late as just last week or two, Parliament was recalled to approve some loans. So I don't know whether that has been factored in or not. And so the IMF may be right, government may be right. Just yesterday, BBC reported that the Bulgarian currency is a euro, or is euro. They have come to retract that. So it is not as if to say that when the IMF says something, it is cast in iron and stone. So we need to ensure that the Bank of Ghana comes to tell us the calculation, that is to say the debt to GDP ratio, how they arrive at that figure and at what point. Because I'm sure that some loans may be taken, but Bank of Ghana has not factored it in. So it's just a matter of reconciling. On the issue of...
Really? That's
oh, yes.
simple.
Yes.
I see.
One person is turning out figures, another is also turning another figure. So what do? The two must sit and reconcile and find out what the modus operandi was.
Quickly to the next issue.
That has to do with, I'm told, change of technology. I'm told that the old cards are no longer in use. International best practices require that we upgrade these cards. You remember this one, the last one, the current cards, we use our 5 fingers. I'm told that this time we'll go for 10 fingers because that's the best practice. But the question to ask is, didn't they know that this system was becoming outmoded? And for us to spend that amount of money, and today they are now telling us that there's new technology. But there's a need for it. And I'm told that this kind of exercises, you don't do it once and get it because of the fact that technology keeps on changing in this area. I'm not competent to talk about the quantum of money that is used or being asked for to do the registration. But I think that there's a need for us to have cards that are of international standards.
Right. Mr. Short.
Well, I'll just talk about the NIA. I think that's unfortunate that we have to spend so much more money after the initial exercise. And it shows, of course, as my colleague has said, that there was bad planning, you know. I understand that initially there was the plan to upgrade the identity card, which was being done in about 10 years' time, to have a chip on it, you know, which would be more credible. But I think that there has to be an investigation to find out exactly what went wrong.
Sure.
And I heard Professor Kenatefa, who was the executive director,
right,
secretary at one time, and his explanation was that the government did not release funds on time. The project was time-bound, and therefore certain exercises could not be carried out when they should have been carried out. Equipments became obsolete, and then also some of the equipment were stolen, and so there were a lot of reasons why the whole exercise could not be done, you know, diligently and in the time that it was supposed to be done. So I think there's the need to find out exactly what happened before this additional money is spent. But I think that everybody agrees that we need to upgrade the existing national identity cards which were issued. I have one, not just a paper. I have the actual.
And people actually have been preaching. Lucky. People have been preaching an integrated ID, so that we don't have one ID for that, one ID for that, one ID for the next thing. Next time we're going for elections, the EC is going to generate its own IDs.
Yeah, we should have thought about that from the very beginning. But that may be a good idea. But what I'm saying is that, you know, there's a need to find out exactly what happened, you know, to the earlier exercise, why it was aborted.
Okay. Thank you. Prof.
So I'll just stick with the IMF issue. I think it is never wise, in my view, for a government to either falsify or be seen to be falsifying economic data, whether it is to the citizens or to a lender. When it has to do with the economy, your citizens feel the economy in their daily lives, in the marketplace, in their pockets. So when you falsify, say, inflation data, it makes no difference. People really go to the marketplace. It's not, inflation is not determined at the Bank of Ghana. It's determined in the daily transactions that people engage in the marketplace, in their homes, in their kitchens. So they will feel it. If you falsify it to a lender, then you're raising a risk. The reason why the IMF does this is that, of course, if you were to go to a bank to borrow money, if you're a corporation, they will ask you to submit some reports, your balance sheets, your income statement, because they want to assess the level of your risk, on the basis of which they will make determinations as to the interest rates that's appropriate to you, given your risk and other terms. That's why the IMF does this, because they have to protect their loan. They are giving us an amount of money. They have to be sure that we can pay and service the debt on time. So it is in their interest as the lender to go through this process. So I think that when we do this, we should try, I don't know how this will settle, but if, as Kweku says, we have a record of having done this at least once before, we should be careful not to be seen in the international lending community as habitual liars when it comes to these things, because it will affect our credit rating, it will affect the terms on which lenders lend us money. But the only other point I want to make about the IMF issue is on the issue of the unsustainable levels of debt that we are accumulating. And I think, again, I like to see these issues from a governance perspective. There is very little discipline in our constitutional framework. There is very little discipline on a government's appetite to borrow. All you have to get is a simple majority of parliament, and at any one time when you feel you are in distress, you can borrow your way out of the mess. It undermines our democracy. It creates what we call a moral hazard. When the people cannot punish a profligate government, because the government can just go out and borrow billions of dollars whenever it's in a bind by just having a simple majority rubber stamp it, we then lose the ability to use our power as citizens to really check that kind of behavior. So we should really be thinking again about how do we make it less easy to borrow money in the amounts that we are borrowing. I think, again, I am moving close to a supermajority requirement for certain levels of foreign borrowing. So that we do not, somebody says, well, but then it means that the other side can block. If the other side knows that they too, when they get to, if they use that power recklessly to block you, you will also use it against them. But what it will do is that it will force us to have a national conversation, build a consensus in the political class before we go out and borrow huge amounts of money. It also would mean that whatever the amounts are borrowed for, they will be sure that it is used on projects that are multi-partisan.
Thank you.
So because if you have just one side,
from BNFT, the
Yes.
newspaper.
Business Financial
Yes,
Times.
look at the caption. IMF jumps to Bank of Ghana's defense on debt to GDP ratio, and a portion of it says the disparity in the figures actually arose from the use of two different timelines by the two, that's Bank of Ghana and IMF. While the Bank of Ghana figures correspond to its calculation to the first half of 2014, the IMF was based on its projections, given current economic situations such as weak currency for the year 2015.
Thank you.
Who's talking? IMF?
So
Yes.
BNFT
BNFT,
reporting.
that's it, they are reporting.
Date.
Okay.
It's two times.
And is it IMF they are quoting?
Yes,
Source.
Saturday, October 11, 2014, 9:08.
Okay.
You can go for the BA.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
which,
you.
Which IMF?
Thank you, Amal.
You must know. IMF
A senior
official.
IMF official
Was-
at a press briefing on Wednesday in Washington, D.C., has stated that Ghana's, the name is not there, but BFFI.
Okay,
Now,
we'll look out for it. We'll look out for it.
Look out for it.
As always, my shirt is provided by Latida. Always be in vogue, and Latida, you can contact them 026565 0918 or 020-433-6444. That's Latida, and get the best designs in African wear, and they are the best quality, but they sell very, very cheap. Now, this message from Victor Boesi Boateng in Copenhagen. He says that on the corruption, this is the way to solve it. He says, first, both our public and private institutions must be transparent and forthcoming with information when that is necessary. Information Act, I think we should be thinking about that. Number two, the police, prosecutors, and the judiciary must work independently to win public confidence. And finally, the political parties must be sponsored by the state to avoid political patronage. Interesting messages that you send there. Thank you very much, Sedemofori. I have enjoyed the panel.
Yeah, it's been good.
Abdul Malik Kwekubaku Jr. is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. He is a regular panelist. And Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh is a professor of law. Thank you very much for coming again to the studios.
Thanks for having me.
Justice Francis Emil Short is a former commissioner of the SHRAJ, that is Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. We thank you very much that you could make time to be with us this morning. Yeah. 3 hours, that's a lot. Yeah. And
very useful.
Abraham Amalba is a legal practitioner. He also teaches law and is a member of the NDC legal team. I am Samson Ladi Ayenini, and this show is repeated at 9:30 on the dot on this platform. Joy News on Multi TV. Have a good afternoon. The news is up next on Joy 99.7 FM.